Welcome back to the Reier on YouTube channel. It is a Monday night. You've got Game 3 of the Major League World Series. Dodgers and Yankees from the Bronx. You've got Monday Night Football. Brent, I've even got some college basketball over here to my left up on the screen. Alabama, Memphis exhibition hoops from up there in Huntsville.
That's right.
But hey, we're still going to talk some ball.
No,
We're going to talk
no doubt.
some SEC football. Travis Reier back with you on Second Helping alongside my great friend and co-host, Mr. Brent Beaird. Brent, of course, longtime college football analyst, most recently for First Coast News down in Jacksonville, Florida. And Brent, also a voter for the most prestigious honor in all of collegiate athletics, the Heisman Trophy. Brent, a lively week 9 in the Southeastern Conference in the books. And, as crazy as this may sound, as we head into the month of November, one unbeaten team in SEC play, and that team, the Aggies of Texas A&M.
Give Mike Elko a lot of credit. Really did a good job at Duke. Has done frankly, a tremendous job at Texas A&M. Trav, I think they've rebounded from that Notre Dame loss and are really playing really good football right now. They've changed quarterbacks a little bit. And oh, by the way, I know with your eagle eye that you caught that little backdoor shade thrown at Jimbo. This is a real program. It's not a fake. It's not a politician running this program, talking fast and BSing everybody. This is a real program, Trav. And listen, if people don't think there's any, I don't know if drama's the word, but these coaches still bring it from time to time.
They do. I think even Chino, our show mascot, right there, making an appearance, as he does pretty much on a weekly basis. I think even Chino sort of caught what Mike Elko was cooking there in the post game with that comment. And it really kind of begs the question of who does Mike Elko look that good right now in his first year as Texas A&M head coach, or does Jimbo look even worse in retrospect now, given what we've seen from the Aggies, especially after that season opening loss to the Notre Dame Fighting Irish? We'll get more into that. We'll get more into that game involving LSU and also Texas A&M as we move through our recap from last Saturday's action. We'll start early, work our way into prime time. And we'll start with that early game, Oklahoma and Ole Miss. Very interesting first half from Oxford, I thought, Brent. Jackson Arnold back in there as the starting quarterback for the Sooners. Sooners trying to avoid a 1-4 start to Southeastern Conference play. Jackson Dart comes up big, even without his top receiver in Trey Smith. Henry Parrish kind of limited in his effectiveness on the ground, but nice to have a tight end like Caden Priscorn, like Ole Miss has, and Jordan Watkins and some other guys came up big at the wide receiver position too.
Yeah, they really did. Now they have got to have a healthy Trey Harris at some point on the draft.
Yep.
I mean that's just absolutely has got to happen. Listen, are you concerned that they can't run the ball? I talked to an Ole Miss beat writer. He said when Junkins went to Ohio State, he was concerned that the running game may go with him. Jackson Dart better, certainly a solid win, but still not quite what they want to see, is it?
Yeah, I like Parrish, right? But he's not kind of that 20 carry guy. He's not a volume guy when I kind of look at him. I think that's why Ole Miss went to the portal too for a guy like Logan Diggs.
Yeah.
Bring him in from LSU previously of Notre Dame. Would have given him more of that physical presence maybe in the run game, but he hasn't been available. So that is a bit of a concern And even with Jackson Dart and his ability to run the football, you still would like to have another guy to go
Yes.
along with Henry
Oh,
Parrish.
yeah.
They're a little bit
Absolutely.
thin at that running back spot, but they're also able to do some things in their passing game that sort of supplements the run.
Mhm.
They're technically passes, as we've seen. Lane has a history with jet sweeps and the quick game to the perimeter. So maybe they can get enough of it from that perspective. But I thought defensively a very impressive second half uh, for Ole Miss on Saturday, because Oklahoma had that thing going pretty good, even without the wide receiver. You want to talk about wide receiver absences? It continues for Oklahoma, but ran the ball fairly well in the first half. I like that OU, with the change at coordinator on the offensive side, got Jackson Arnold involved in the
Yeah.
run game as a big part of that. But still, in the second half, Pete Golding and his guys on the defensive side for the Rebels ramp things up, and Oklahoma needed to be able to have that extra gear on
Mhm.
offense.
Yes.
And because of the situation at wide receiver right now, just didn't get the sense that that was going to happen. And as it is, Ole Miss goes on to blank the Sooners in the second half, 16-0.
And Trav, real quick, did you like the Perkins kid at linebacker
Oh
for
man, he's a
Ole
player.
Miss? 11 tackles, 5 of them were for loss, 4 sacks. Could you say that he was rather efficient on the day?
Yeah, he is that do-it-all backer, man, that everybody loves these days. He's a guy that you can play as an edge guy, as a rusher. He can play inside. Sunterian Perkins, what is it with these Perkins guys at the linebacker position in
Yeah,
the
really.
Southeastern Conference the last
Yeah.
few years? But future star, if he isn't
Mhm.
already, just
Really.
a big time player. And again, kudos to Pete Golding and his
Mhm.
defensive guys, and a very impressive performance. Fortunately for Oklahoma, it gets a sort of respite, you would think,
Oh,
out of
really?
conference this week. This Oklahoma team right now at 4-4, you're starting to wonder about bowl eligibility. Well, UMass coming up, I believe, this week, Brent, should be able to get your fifth win there. But as we know, November, not a bowl of cherries for a lot of teams around the Southeastern Conference.
Well, and I tell you this, I know you've gotten a little feedback, shall we say, from Oklahoma fans, but you were straight on, and look, and it's not, this thing is just the reality is what it amounts to. It's a tough transition to this league, and again, when you've got all your receivers hurt, you're rotating quarterbacks, and most of all, your offensive line has to be replaced. It is a situation that you can see around basically a 500 year or maybe a little better.
Yeah, it just had the earmarks of being a tough entrance to the league for Oklahoma because of what you talked about a lot in the off season, and it showed up again in the second half
Mhm.
against Ole Miss. Once Ole Miss started to take care of the run game well
Yeah.
enough, there
Yes.
was no way OU could protect Jackson Arnold in
No.
obvious pass situations. He was just a sitting target there at that point. So Oklahoma now at 1-4. You think about some of the one-win
Really.
SEC programs right now around this league. Proud programs. I mean, Oklahoma,
Yeah.
Auburn just got its first win.
Yeah.
We're going to talk
Yeah.
about the Tigers coming up here
Mhm.
in just a little
Mhm.
bit. Boy, not a league for the faint of heart, no
No.
doubt about that. And as for Ole Miss, I'm going to travel to the next team we're going to talk about coming up this week. Ole Miss will go to Arkansas, and that sleepy 11 a.m. Central kickoff coming up
Yes.
Saturday in Northwest Arkansas to take on a Razorbacks team that I've got to apologize to, Brent. On our program late last week here on Reier on YouTube, I went out on that limb and picked Mississippi State to get its
Mhm.
first SEC win of the season. That did not happen, as Bobby Petrino and the Arkansas Razorbacks, especially on the offensive side of the ball, nearly dropped a 60 burger on homestanding
Yeah.
MSU. Talon Green, man, that was a pretty mature
Mhm.
performance for him. He's
Mhm.
still a little bit loose with the football for my liking for that Arkansas offense, but hey, 5 touchdown passes. Just a really complete performance. We talked about it late last week. This is an Arkansas offense right now without its top option at the running back
Yes.
position, but
Yes.
Braylon Russell steps in there and goes off for a buck 75. Andrew Armstrong is a legit number one at the wide receiver position. Very mature performance for Arkansas to go ahead and get that 5th win, 3-2 in the league. And Sam Pittman looking like he's in good shape for another year in 2025.
Yeah, 5-3 overall, and looking to get into a bowl game. To piggyback to what you were saying, Trev, what's that running game going to be when Jaquindon Jackson, who missed the last game with an injury,
Yep.
and Russell kind of either interchange each other, or maybe they're in the backfield at the same time? That's going to be a problem for some defenses, is it not?
It could be. Look, Ole Miss has definitely improved on defense. We'll talk about this matchup with the Hogs and the Rebels later in the week, but it's going to be a physical morning
Yes.
at Reynolds
Yes.
Razorback Stadium,
Really,
I think,
really is.
when you get those two teams together coming up this week. Mississippi State falls to 1-7, 0-5 in the league. Michael Van Buren, the freshman quarterback, throws for 300 plus again, 2 touchdowns, couple of interceptions. But yeah, I guess if you were kind of looking for something to pick on, if you're looking at Arkansas as maybe defensively not always great in this game but look, when you're up 31-10 at the half and you have 41 points through 3 quarters, you're in pretty good shape there, no doubt about that. In the later afternoon games, we saw the hamstrung Missouri offense. We talked about this late last week with that matchup at Alabama in Tuscaloosa, Missouri, with Brady Cook, very questionable going into the latter stages of the practice week. He ends up giving it a go, doesn't last a half because he incurs another injury, this time to his throwing hand. And Alabama really did what it needed to do for the second straight week. Give that Alabama defense a lot of credit. Came out and set the tone against Missouri. This time had 4 quarters of quality play in it, unlike the previous week at Tennessee.
Yeah.
And, it took
Right.
Jalen Milroe and this Alabama
Mhm.
offense some time. But again, with Missouri really limited on offense, not just at quarterback, but at running back as well, there wasn't that sense of urgency that Alabama was forced to feel on the
Yeah.
offensive side, maybe like it was at Tennessee a week ago.
Well, and let's be honest, Drew Pine, the backup quarterback in Missouri, is average at best, is evidenced by throwing 3 touchdowns. Missouri was like in the top 20 in the Division I in percentage of returning production. But man, because of injuries and so forth, that has been a problem. Trev, I thought the number one thing Bama did, especially defensively, that had a huge impact on this game was limiting Luther Burden and what he could do. Now, I know he's been banged up some, and I get some of that. Now, kudos to Johnny Walker, the edge rusher from Missouri, who made things rather uncomfortable at times for Jalen Milroe. But boy, this, and by the way, Trav, before we get on Alabama, Missouri is off. Is there another team in the league that needs an off week worse than Missouri right now?
They really do, because you saw it, as you said, once you got into the quarterback depth for Missouri with Pine, it was not pretty.
No.
And give Alabama credit, kind of took advantage
Mm-hmm.
of those opportunities. Really, the second quarter interception that Pine threw to Malachi
Yes.
Moore with the big return, that seemed to give that Alabama offense the boost that it
Yes.
needed
Sure
there.
did.
Milroe hits the explosive play to Emmanuel Henderson down inside the 5. Jam Miller gets in the end zone. Even at 13-0 at that point, you're thinking this Alabama defense hasn't really put together 4 great quarters against a
No.
quality
Right.
opponent, but 13 might be enough with
Yeah.
what Missouri was dealing with. And for Theo Weiss and Luther Burden, the wide receivers for Missouri, it's got to be especially frustrating when you don't have someone who can get you the football. Now, Missouri's in this situation in part because Sam Horn, who they expected to be their
right.
next best guy,
Mm-hmm.
back in February, earlier in the year, had to undergo Tommy John surgery because
Yeah.
Horn's a baseball football guy. So quarterback depth, man, it's hard enough to keep a starter around in
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
places these days, let alone if you got quarterback depth. It's a real luxury. Unfortunately for Missouri, you said it. Need to figure out if you can get Cook as healthy as possible for this finishing kick, or there could be a couple more L's coming from Missouri. Although that schedule, as we've talked about going back to
Mm-hmm.
the offseason, might be a bit of a saving
Oh,
grace. And
yeah.
I think I mentioned Mississippi State or Oklahoma. Oklahoma gets Maine coming up, and Mississippi State gets UMass. So
Yes.
not really a bye week for those two, but
Mm-hmm.
perhaps something even better, a much needed win for those two clubs. So Alabama, what do you think, Brent? Was it the type of performance where you walked away saying to yourself, I think Alabama has gotten through this rough patch, starting to play some complementary football where you're seeing some things transition from both sides of the ball, even with special teams? Graham Nicholson with a couple of field goals for the Crimson Tide against Missouri. Or do you need to see a little bit more, as in a week from Saturday night at Tiger Stadium?
Yeah, and that's going to be humongous. I think the thing that impressed me as much as anything else, running 37 times and only throwing 26. I think that's more into kind of where they are. And by the way, very little has been said about it, but Bama won game number 1,000. I mean, they don't give those away anywhere, so they deserve a lot of credit for that in number of victories. But listen, and I know he caught your eye like he did mine. Trev, this Bray Hubbard at safety who got the pick. He also got 7 tackles in an interception. Obviously he's learning the game. What I love about this guy is he knows where he needs to be at all times, and he is there. So I'm sure that's a guy that got your attention too.
Yeah, Keon Sabb, typically the starting safety to go along with Malachi Moore in that Alabama secondary, out with an injury. Looks like it's going to be an extended stretch. So this wasn't just a one-game fill-in, you don't
Yeah.
think, for Bray Hubbard, and he passed the test with flying colors. And a lot of times with a young safety, what you're worried about is busts and guys
Yes.
running
Yes.
open because assignments or checks get missed. But you didn't see that with Bray Hubbard
No.
on Saturday against Missouri. This is a guy, as you said, where he was supposed to be, when he was supposed to be there, and then showed you some playmaking ability
Mm-hmm.
and going up and high pointing the interception he recorded there in the second half. So, all in all, I'd say an encouraging performance
Yes.
for Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
Do I think the Alabama fan base feels better entirely about things after what it saw in the losses to Vanderbilt, and also, the loss at Tennessee, and the sort of all over the road
Yeah.
performance against
Yeah.
South Carolina? No, I don't. I think they're still in wait and see mode, and really in a couple different aspects of this football team, including quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it was important for Jalen Milroe to have the kind of performance he had. It wasn't maybe as prolific as what we've seen from him in some games this season, but he took care of the football, really did some nice things with his legs. That run game, as you said,
Yes.
second half, over 200 rushing yards,
Mm-hmm.
finished the game emphatically, and then preserved the shutout late. So, yeah, encouraging, but sort of reasserting Alabama as a college football playoff favorite or a candidate at this point. Yeah, it's going to come down to LSU. You get the
Yep.
sense
That's
in a
right.
couple of Saturdays. So, keeping with that afternoon slate, Diego Pavia and
Oh,
Vanderbilt hosting fifth-ranked Texas. The Longhorns smarting after that humbling it sustained at the hands of the Georgia Bulldogs the previous Saturday night. Vanderbilt, once again, made it very interesting. Diego did everything he could, turned the ball over a couple times, but so did Quinn Ewers for Texas. So deflected passes, man. Saw multiple interceptions come off of those for both these quarterbacks. And, end of the day, Texas did something Alabama wasn't able to do against Vanderbilt. And that was get out early and kind of control this game, right? Get into a position of 21-7 in the first half, even 21-10. But even with that, and even up 10 there late, Diego and his guys still made it interesting in Nashville.
Give them a lot of credit, to say the least. Frankly, to 2 interceptions from Ewers. I mean, he still threw 3 touchdowns, so that evens out a little bit. To go along with that too. Texas 6 offensive penalties, most of those on the offensive line. DeAndre Moore, wide receiver. Also wanted to mention a little bit about him. 6 catches, almost 100 yards and away. That's well said. That getting ahead of them made a big difference. And I know there are no moral victories, but I can tell you this, that that was a lot closer. Trav, I'm just wondering what was that 3-point win was that a little close for maybe Las Vegas in some ways?
I think so. Yeah. If you like Texas and laid the points on the road, you didn't like that outcome.
No.
But look, I give Vanderbilt defensively some credit here. We talk so much about Diego, but even offensively, there's some other guys. Junior Sherrill is, to me, really emerged as a legitimate guy on the outside to go along with Eli Stowers there at the tight end, or sort of hybrid position that Diego leans on so much. But, that defense sacked Quinn Ewers 4 times and picked him off twice, which you kind of look at that from the other side with Texas and think, is there some issues there with after what Georgia was able to do defensively to Texas? Vanderbilt had some success as well. Ewers, I'll give him this, whether it's because he's oblivious or truly that poised, he doesn't ever seem to be, flustered when things aren't going well. But look, if you're Texas, you get the road win, you get out of there, and now you get ready for a big month of November as the Longhorns, they head into a bye week here.
That's
get an opportunity to kind of get themselves together like Alabama, like LSU, for this defining November stretch. So as we keep it moving from Saturday, one that lived up to it. You want fireworks? How about this second half? And really throughout the game, LSU at Texas A&M. The Aggies down 17-7 at the half, 10-0, really right out the gates after Le'Veon Moss had the fumble that LSU was able to turn into points. And I liked LSU in this game. I felt pretty good about it when it was 10-0. I felt good about it when it was 17-7 in the third quarter.
Oh, yeah.
But who didn't feel good about it? Marcel Reed coming off the bench. Give Mike Elko a ton of credit. It felt like, Brent, he had seen this with Connor Wigman already against Notre Dame. It was not going well for that Texas A&M offense. Makes the switch to Reed, and the switch goes on for the Aggie offense.
Trav, do you think spending that $75 million to get Jimbo out was worth it to them right now?
Yeah, even if you had to load up that brass spittoon 10 or 12 times to come up with the cash.
Yes.
Which it probably didn't take that many for the A&M people, but we talked about it. I mean, Elko, it's not going to be flashy. He said it himself in those comments post-game.
Oh, yeah.
It's not going to be glitz. It's not going to be glamour, but it's going to be really physical football, and an emphasis probably even more so on defense. And boy, they really got after Garrett Nussmeier there in that second half. Even when they didn't get real pressure on Garrett, I think he sensed or thought there was pressure. And that's something Elko is a master of. Even when there isn't real pressure, quarterbacks tend to think or start seeing ghosts, and they respond accordingly. And with
Yeah.
Nussmeier, we saw it in the form of 3 interceptions.
Well, and listen, Trav, the thing that really, and this is more for later, but for now, look, when you've got that kind of defensive line, and this Nick Skirton kid who came from the Big Ten is paying dividends. Some guys you mentioned too, Shamir Stewart with that. Listen, you and I've covered this league long enough to know when you've got a front seven like they do, you've always got a chance, don't you?
You do, and it goes back to running the football still, man.
Yes,
And A&M,
yes,
when it was all said and done, nearly ran for 300 yards
it's amazing,
in this
isn't it?
game. And some of the things, if you're an LSU fan, that you thought maybe
Yes,
you had overcome
yes.
defensively from a year ago, like when Jalen Milroe a year ago ran for $155 and 4 touchdowns
Mm,
against LSU. And there was just green grass for much of
yes.
the night in Tuscaloosa in that performance. Some of those old wounds got reopened by
Mhm.
Marcel Reed. And look,
Yeah.
Reed is wizard like with that
It
zone
really
read
is.
game, and he's reading it too. It's not predetermined
Yeah.
gives and pulls. This is a guy who's making those calls on the fly. And so I think the experience too that Elko was able to get Marcel Reed earlier in the season, that shows up big when you go
It
to him
really
there in the
does.
third quarter. He was very comfortable. And
Mhm.
then when you think, well, it's just going to be Marcel Reed giving it or pulling it, then he goes up top, and hits an explosive play through the air for 54 yards to Noah Thomas. Now, for LSU, Garrett Nussmeier throws for 405, but the 3 interceptions were large.
Yes.
LSU not able to run the ball effectively. And LSU's field goal team
Mm.
was a nightmare
Yeah.
in this game.
Really what it really was, wasn't it?
Oh, I mean, couple of missed field goals, some issues with the operation. You have a snap on a field goal attempt go off the
Mm.
holder's right
Yeah.
shoulder pad. Brian
Man.
Kelly afterwards or in the time since Saturday night has promised LSU fans that will never happen again, which I took to mean the holder has been fired.
Yeah, yeah, really.
Um,
Yes.
he's going to be the lamb in
Mhm.
all this, but still some positives on the offensive side because Kyron Lacey is such a big deal um, at the wide receiver position. But Aaron Anderson continues to make plays.
He does.
The Alabama transfer, 3
Mhm.
catches, 126. He had the big one for a touchdown there on a slant. And after the catch, he is really, really tough to deal with. A&M, what I love about A&M's backs, Brent, is whether it's Le'Veon Moss or Amari Daniels, these guys hit it.
Yeah,
They hit it with authority.
they do.
There isn't a lot of hesitation. There isn't a lot of bouncing. There isn't a lot of dancing. There isn't a stepping out of bounds at the end of runs. These guys have game breaking type speed, especially Daniels, but they run it. They run it with authority. They're decisive and they get north and south pretty quickly. So again, LSU heads into the bye week, takes on Alabama a week from Saturday night in Baton Rouge. And what about this one? You want to talk about a maturity game for A&M going on the road? South
Oh,
Carolina coming off a
oh
bye.
yeah. Oh
South
yes.
Carolina feeling really good about itself after
Mhm.
thumping
Mhm.
Oklahoma a couple of Saturdays ago in Norman. South Carolina waiting on the Aggies Saturday night in Cola. We'll talk more about that one a little bit later in the week. But you mentioned it with A&M's defensive front. South Carolina feels like
They do.
in that front seven,
Yeah.
they get after you a little bit too, don't they?
Mhm. Oh yeah, no, there's no doubt about that. The Kennard kid is almost unblockable, frankly. And again, South Carolina reminds me of Oklahoma in a lot of ways. Strong defense and a struggling offense, but that is that is a really astute point. Will certainly be on Mike Elko and that coaching staff on how they can get A&M at an even keel. And as you know, South Carolina, after they've had a week off, that is not an easy place to play at night.
And it makes me think Marcel Reed needs to be the guy going into South
Yeah,
Carolina
yeah, true.
because A&M's offensive line still isn't quite there yet, and they've had some changes and some, I think, injuries maybe to that front that have dictated some of that. So against that South Carolina front, I don't know if I want Connor Weigman standing in there, right?
Absolutely.
I may want this guy, Marcel Reed, and everything he can bring with his legs, working that for the Aggies offense in that matchup against South Carolina, which we'll talk about again a little bit later in the week here on Second Helping. By the way, if you haven't subscribed to Reier on YouTube, we hope you'll take the time right now. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that notifications bell. That way you're alerted to all of our content as it drops here on the channel. And also, if you would hit us with a thumbs up, a like, that would help us out tremendously as well. Let's talk about the breakthrough for the Auburn Tigers up in Lexington, Kentucky last Saturday night. I think Brent Jarquez Hunter might still be running through the blue grass. 23 carries, 278 yards, 2 touchdowns. We talked about it really throughout the season and up to this point. You figured if there was going to be a point where Auburn broke through, it would likely involve Jarquez Hunter leading the way, more so than putting the ball too much into Peyton Thorne's hands. Boy, what a few days for Hugh Freeze too.
Boy,
doesn't travel with the team because of illness. Flies up private jet on Saturday.
Oh yeah.
And hey, that's the type of get well present that I think Hugh can enjoy. And we'll talk about Kentucky too. But more than anything, boy, Jarquez Hunter showing you once again why he went into this season as one of the top backs in the Southeastern Conference.
Well, I'm glad that he took him basically into November to figure out that they needed to give Hunter more than 10 carries in a game. I mean, the amazing thing about this is, Trav, he had like 1 carry for -1 in the first quarter, and then really was able to. I mean, listen, this reminds me of the A&M backs. When he runs, he punishes people.
Yeah.
And he still only had 23 carries. That's a pretty healthy average on that too. And look, I want to give a little bit of love to the Auburn defense. Guys like Jay Crawford, who is a true freshman, had a pick, had a couple of tackles. So to their credit, Trav, if they ever figure out, it may be by the end of the year, what they can do on offense, I think their defense has been fairly solid.
Yeah, Hunter with 1 carry in the first quarter?
Yeah.
And Kentucky's up 10-0.
Yeah, yes.
So going into the second quarter, things switched pretty quickly, and I think you can thank Jarquez Hunter for a lot of that. But you're right. The Auburn defense responded after that opening quarter, and Auburn reels off 24 straight to win on the road up at Kentucky. Boy, interesting coming up for Auburn again with Diego Pavia on the schedule, really, making his triumphant return to the Plains after leading New Mexico State to a win over the Tigers at Jordan-Hare a year ago. So we'll talk more about that one also later in the week. But what about Kentucky at this point, man? This trajectory for this team, I don't know. We saw early in the season reason for concern when South Carolina went in there and just thumped Kentucky, but then Kentucky turns around. Kentucky's only SEC win now at 1-5 on the road at Ole Miss. How's that make you feel?
Yeah.
If you're an Ole Miss fan, that this is, one of the 2 losses you have came against this Kentucky team. I don't know for Kentucky at this point, because it doesn't get any easier this week. Go on the road for a night game at rival Tennessee. We talked about this lengthy bowl streak that the Wildcats have enjoyed under Mark Stoops. It looks anything but guaranteed. I guess you think about Louisville struggling right now. Maybe that's a game at the end of the season Kentucky can win. You still got, I think, an FCS game out there. But this really wasn't expected for a Mark Stoops team after that performance against Ole Miss. Then they went into a bye week, and it's like they never came out of it.
Yeah, really. Well, and listen, Trav, the concerning thing is They benched Vandegrift in favor of Rutgers transfer Gavin Winsett. So what do you do now with that? Now they've got some good receivers like Dane Key, who has been good the whole year. But look, this is an offensive situation. Trav, they have not scored more than 20 points in an SEC game this year.
I love Brock Vandegrift's makeup. Like,
Yes.
I think he is the kind of tough guy that you want at the position.
Yes.
But it just seems like skill set wise, he's just limited.
He is.
He's not that true higher level, even mid-level SEC passer. And it's a shame because, as you said, there are guys still, Barry and Brown, Dane Key, there are still guys on the outside, but in going to the portal for a fit for what Kentucky was bringing back around the quarterback position, I just don't know if Brock Vandegrift was that guy. Again, give him a lot of credit. Made some gutty plays at Ole Miss in that upset of the Rebels. Hit the big fourth down ball, threw a dime late in that game against the Rebels to help Kentucky get the job done. But, boy, it just hasn't been the same since.
No.
And, again, you talk about teams that at this point in the season you didn't anticipate being one-win teams in the Southeastern Conference. Auburn's one of those teams. We talked about Oklahoma, though. I think in terms of brand, you don't anticipate Oklahoma being 1-4 in the league.
Absolutely not.
But just kind of weighing things for that team and where they were at coming into the season, it wasn't all that unrealistic to think it could be a tough go this season. So, as we talked about earlier, and we wrap it up here, one unbeaten team in the Southeastern Conference at this point. That is, of course, the Texas A&M Aggies, who, as we talked about, going to be put to the test at South Carolina, I think, Saturday night.
Well, it's already been an incredible year all the way around, and obviously we'll get into this later. Huge game. Georgia and Florida, Georgia, wherever your allegiance goes.
Pops is a Gator. Pops is a Gator. But his rule on how that gets called, Florida, Georgia, Florida, he has always said the winner of the previous year's game, they're first. So for him, even as a Gator right now, it's Georgia, Florida. Now, Florida wins the game Saturday. Then for the next year, it'll be Florida, Georgia. I don't make the rules. Who knows how Pops comes up with this, but I've heard that for 55 years.
Now, listen, I want to point this out real quick as we wrap things up here. There are a couple of rules that you and I have had forever. One is the team with the most rushing yards usually wins. And the other rule is the team that wins a turnover battle usually wins. But I know you've seen this, but it still makes me laugh, and because it's just so incredulous. Trev, SMU won a game with 6 turnovers.
Yeah,
and this is Coach Kublik. I give him credit for this. This only happened with SMU twice in the last 20 years. And listen, they beat Duke, Trav. SMU had 6 turnovers and Duke had 0. and they still were able to win. That's one of those that, you know what, if there's anything that kind of sums up the year so far, and I know there are a lot of examples of it with how bizarre it is, that's one of the best ones I've seen to this point.
That brings to mind my favorite 30 for 30 of all time. Pony Excess.
Yes.
When it comes to turnovers, right?
That's right.
That 30 for 30 on 1980s SMU football. Wow. Yeah. If you haven't seen that one, check that one out.
And Trev, there were some Trans Ams involved.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of no comments about that. Trev.
Well, that was Eric Dickerson's. And it was the SMU people called it the Trans A&M because A&M supposedly bought it for him.
Yeah.
Or they made the down payment They
Yes.
made the down payment, and then when he switched his commitment to SMU picked up the payments.
Yeah.
The good
Yeah.
old 80s in Southwest Conference
Yeah.
football, baby.
They were only too
Yeah.
glad to help, right?
Yeah. I'm not all that thrilled about being as old as I am these days,
Mm.
but one of the things I am thrilled about is that I'm old enough to remember the 80s
Oh,
in the
yes.
Southwest Conference.
Oh,
So,
yeah. Yeah. Hey,
yeah,
those,
Wild Wild West. Y'all just think it's the Wild Wild West right
yeah.
now.
Yeah, really.
It was the
Really.
Wild Wild Southwest Conference back
Absolutely.
then. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And oh, by the way, those Miami Hurricane fans, what we like to say is that they like to have a word about the 80s and the 90s too,
Yeah,
Trev.
yeah, they think they're back, maybe.
Yeah.
Miami fans
Yeah.
think they're maybe back.
Yeah.
I mean, Cam Ward's amazing.
He
And I know
is.
you're a Heisman Trophy voter,
Yes.
and I know he's got to be very high
He
on
is.
your list right now.
Well,
But when I look at Miami, I think of FSU last year.
yeah. Yeah.
This Miami
Good
team,
point.
I think Florida State might have been even more complete last year.
Mhm.
But the point being, Jordan Travis was such a huge
He
part
was.
of that
He really
football team, and we
was.
know what happened after he went
Oh,
out.
yeah.
So hopefully Cam Ward stays healthy, and we get to see exactly what the ceiling is for the
Mhm.
Hurricanes coming up here. Brent, as always, a lot of fun, my friend.
Enjoyed it. Chino says goodbye to everybody. And Chino says happy Halloween too. Okay.
Happy Halloween. Be careful out there. You got the trick-or-treaters out and about. I was thinking about this today. I wasn't a big costume kid
Yeah.
ever. I
Yeah.
was just all about the candy.
Absolutely.
If it was a school
Really.
night or whatever, I'd have friends all geared up
Mhm.
to be Batman or whatever they were going to
Yeah.
be,
Yeah.
and I didn't know. I was a ghost a lot of times because I
Yeah.
just wanted to throw something on quick and go get the candy, and I've got
Well, yes.
the root canals to prove it.
I get. And by the way, I'm accompanying one 10-year-old granddaughter, Aurora,
Nice,
on
nice.
Thursday night. Trev, I'm not sure my assignment yet. It may be like the holder of the bag, or
Flashlight.
it
You'll
may be the
you'll have
flashlight.
the flashlight.
Yeah, yeah.
Grandpa is usually flashlight guy.
Hey, and Trev, if I'm checking those Thursday night scores
Oh,
for college football, in that situation, I may get scolded a time or two, either from her or her mother. Okay.
just say you were trying to get the flashlight app to work.
That's
You were
right. I
looking
like
at your
that.
phone trying to get the flashlight app to
I'll
work.
keep that in mind. I
Yeah.
appreciate that greatly.
There's your alibi. There you go. We got you covered, Brent. Hey, Brent, we'll do it again soon, my friend. Always
Good. Look forward
appreciate
to
it.
it.
For Brent Beaird, Travis Reier, thanking you once again for joining us right here on Second Helping on the Reier on YouTube channel. Again, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button for Reier on YouTube. Hit that notification bell. That way you're alerted to all of our content as it drops here on the channel. And also, if you wouldn't mind, we would appreciate a thumbs up, a like. That would help us tremendously as well. For Brent, I'm Travis. Thanks again. And until next time, so long, everybody.